I created this Trinity Bible study for one of my closest Jehovah Witness friends. As a fundamental Baptist myself, my Jehovah Witness friends kept telling me that we as Baptists got most of our Trinity verses out of the New Testament, and that the Old Testament doesn't teach Trinity at all. So with that in mind, let's find out if the Bible teaches Trinity by comparing both the Old and the New Testament Bible scriptures.
Okay, the Father brought Jesus back from the dead. And we just saw that in the previous verse, you know, how the Father brought up the Lord and is also raising us up from the dead. Romans 6:4 says, "Therefore we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life." So clearly, without a doubt, Romans 6:4 says that Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father. So the Father raised Jesus Christ from the dead. No doubt, very specific, very clear, no problem to understand. Jesus brought himself back from the dead. We have, Jesus answered and said unto them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." Okay. Then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple in building. So right away the Jews always think it's got to be physical. It's not. What he's saying, it's got to be physically happening. 46 years was this temple in building, and wilt thou rear it up in 3 days? But he spake of the temple of his body. So clearly, okay, Jesus himself will raise himself up. I will raise it up, he says. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days, which we know, 3 days, and then he came back, okay, in the resurrection, as a living human being again, except perfect this time. And he says, I will raise it up. It can't mean anything else where he did it by his own works, or he did it by his character, or he did it from something he did, because that even goes it slams in the face of a lot of problems. Because if that was the case, then we'd be based everything on works, and we could make it to the Father through works, and we know our works are as filthy rags. So whatever Jesus did, even if he was perfect, which he was, that would not give him the ability, okay, through his works, to raise himself up. But if he rose himself up from the grave, then that means he's God. There's no other way around. Okay, you either believe he's God or you believe he's not God. And then again, if that's not strong enough, we're going to read John 10:17 and 18, and it says, "Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, and that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father." So very, very clearly, John 2:19 and 21 and John 10:17 and 18, Jesus absolutely had power to do it. He had the desire to do it, to raise himself from the dead. He also had the desire to lay down his life. It was his will to have it laid down. He controlled the whole thing, and he himself, through his own self and his own power, rose Jesus himself from the dead. Okay, so, and that also goes into a lot of other issues, like when he was actually dead. Was he existing somewhere else? Of course he was, because he couldn't raise himself back from the dead if he wasn't existing somewhere else. The fact that he created everything, it would have been nothing for him to raise himself from the dead, because he was the one that created everything. So no problem at all, and he had the power to do it. So clearly it was of himself and of his own ability and his own desires. And then we show the Holy Spirit brought Jesus back from the dead. Clearly it says, "But if the Spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his Spirit that dwelleth in you." So the Spirit himself, the individual, the Spirit himself, the Spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you. So who raised Jesus from the dead? We have the Spirit. Now this is a perfect, harmonious comparison of the Trinity I think I've ever seen. We clearly know the Father raised up Jesus in Romans 6:4. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. We clearly know in 2 verses that Jesus raised himself from the dead and that he had the power to do so. We clearly see that the Spirit, the Holy Spirit himself, raised Jesus from the dead. Okay? And if this is all, like I'm saying, from all these verses, one God, there's no problem. There's no problem in this whatsoever. There'd be a big problem if Jesus was not.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to watch the next video explaining the examples of the Old and New Testament Trinity verses.